ding, 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 ding. Hello. Hello, everybody. Well, welcome to another very full reading here at Book and Leaf. I'm so delighted to see all of you. We have an open mic at the beginning, and we have a few open mic readers. And we're going to start with Fran Bull, who is a very well-known artist and writer in this region. And so let's give a clap for Fran.
Thanks, Bea. Thank you for this opportunity. It's a wonderful exercise for me to have it all hanging out. I'm going to read a couple of poems. The first one is seasonal, and I thought that everyone could probably somehow or other relate to this. It's called Haying. The farmer next door sits high on his tractor, watching splinters of grass shoot up between the blades of his machine, falling in furrows on the field, streaking straight to the horizon, to the wall of mountains and to the sun slowly setting. I waved to him from the house, but he gave me no sign, for the back and forth of his machine was all he cared about. His head angled downward, intent on the grass, his body torqued sideways on the seat, one arm resting on the steering wheel, extended, muscular, like God's arm on the Sistine Chapel, his engine grinding hard to swipe the field clean before dusk ends these labors, and he goes home to his wife, leaving the cut green grass, its fragrance rising into the still night air. And the second one I'm reading because my honey is here, and this was a little poem I wrote many years ago in the beginning of our relationship. It's called Night Swimming. The fish took us for themselves as we slithered through the onyx water, whispering bubbles, our feet touching the rough foliage that sprouted on the rocks below. There's an Italian song about a night when the moon jumped up out of the sea. The narrator is astonished, exclaiming, "Mamma mia!" We were two moons jumping out of the sea, gasping for air, glancing upwards in the midst of our tarantella, noticing that the sky above was filled with stars. You've heard that before, sky filled with stars. But no, listen to me, that the sky had stars everywhere, not just the big constellations and the smaller arrangements, but as we rose like two whale moons, two thick petals opening out of the water, we happened to glance upwards, and what had been for years the blue-black velvet of sky, like Merlin's cape, speckled with five-pointed stars, was now, maybe it was Nut, or one of those Hindu goddesses, who has many games for us down here, many surprises to relieve the boredom of existing forever, who unveiled the light show. But that sky was a polka dot array. That sky was teeming with stars, screaming with stars, scattered on the ancient needlepoint like a meadow of Queen Anne's lace, revealing a universe more generous than I had dreamed. So what to do with the wonder? But rise and fall, up out of the sea, back down into the slithering, two jumping moons jackknifing towards the splendor above, and returning to the thick water that harbors swimmers under rock ledges and in grottos, filled with an endless array of phosphorescent fish. Mamma mia, how they jump.
Wow, such extraordinary visual images and verbal ones. So, second reader is Ron Lewis, well known for all of his work in poetry and disseminating it. Yes, Ron is here. Here he is.
I was going to introduce myself as nobody. Thank you for coming. I'm the editor of the Vermont Poetry Newsletter, by the way. If you're interested in poetry and would like to receive a 150-page online newsletter, you don't have to read the whole thing. Just give me your email address after the performances tonight, and I'll put you on my mailing list. So, in keeping with what you would say, poetry doesn't belong to those who write it, but to those who need it. There was a sound. Spring azure is a small butterfly, by the way, if you don't know. There was the sound of the refrigerator on, a low humming, like that of a small, fat bee caught in the summer sunlight that scythes through the ribs of a windowsill, and the memory of last year's ether-edged winter. I spent the day my wife died catching things and setting them free. I listened to the sound butterflies would make as they fluttered and cried out through the gauze of my net. There was the sound of wings tickling the soft center of my hand, opening my palm like a key. Tiny spring azures rattled, tumbling like dice between my fingers, like the sound of the ribbed tent of your chest, the radiant open house of your heart, needing replacement. There was the sound of tiny moths spinning in circles like ballerinas, performing pirouettes and fouettes like the sound of something learned by heart. There was a sound of your heart's cartography beneath my lips on your breasts, my tongue tracing a clear route from the day I kissed that little girl in the playground, her warm skin under her raincoat, listening to the pulse that slipped into her shoes, into her toes. There was a sound your surgeon would make, like the sound of forks in the silverware drawer, scolding the knives, the sound of forceps and scalpels, the sound that Velcro makes when your heart is torn out. There was the sound of a piano in the next room. There was the sound of dishes being stacked in different octaves. There was the sound this morning of waking to the sound of the four-chambered refrigerator going off. Kansas. Dorothy longed for a place where there wasn't any trouble. So after the storm, she slipped into the city, bought a simple watch for the Tin Man, a heart pendant for the lion, and a bale of straw for the scarecrow. Now she's back at the farm and secretly wondering if it could have all been just a dream, as the scarecrow hangs crucified in the cornfield. A woodman's chainsaw snorts in the distance, and the sissy farm worker is being bullied by the chickens. Dorothy sits playing solitaire at the kitchen table, clicking together the heels of her red boots, all the while contemplating the euthanasia of the old dog who is now too crippled to get up, to chase that witch of a debt collector and those imaginary monkeys it thinks it sees back into the barn. One more. Ransacked. My wife wants a burglar who will take it all, kick in the door and strip us blind, have no sense of value, show no mercy, a robbery so complete she will forget what we once owned, swearing they're only things. Through the cartilage of hallways, we will close our eyes, but we'll leave the moonlight on while the streetlights struggle, so we can see his silhouette fog past us. A thief who will steal even the freckles drawn on the small of her scrimshaw white back. An orange meteor shower brailing delicately across her shoulders, traveling the length of her body, where my lips snap along the curve of her neck, smooth as sheets, worn thin as breath. She said we need to start clean, wants the man to rob her of her gray hair, grandmother's best bone china, and clavicle teacups. Fence the television, and while he's at it, launder the family cat, the iguana, the metaphors, strip the wallpaper of its yellow finches, then take the baby with its bathwater. She won't have to show him the difference between dime store jewelry and emerald brooches, because deal is, it all goes. Doesn't even want him to leave us a pot to piss in. Just a promise not to talk or even blink when we hear the dropping of silverware on the way out, poking out of the holes of his canvas bag. And please don't forget the dead Fords and Buicks out back, the kitchen sink, the sound of milk going sour, the Steinway, drawers full of derivatives, and anything lower than tree line or in the food chain than us. When he's done, you've promised to be like the brideless horse, breaking out of its burning barn, running out into the night, letting the silence close in around you, swallowing you whole in the orchard that used to be there.
Makes me definitely wish for a freer life, that's for sure. So our next reader is Amore. I have I did a piece, an art piece called Crossings, and it was about the migrant crisis in Europe. And I just wrote this piece. I don't know what to call it, maybe a prose poem. Lots of questions, an existential query, refugees. So we have our own issues, and I just felt that it might be interesting to share. If refugees were streaming across our land, what would I feel? Frightened? Dismayed? Questioning myself? What to do? Eyes of frightened children, gaze of tough men, imploring women. Would I invite them into my home? Too many. For how long? Would one family stand out from the rest? Would we offer them spare rooms not used? Where is the Christian spirit? That famous Italian hospitality. Would I trust them to stay in my studio? Strangers in a strange land, in my house. Love thy neighbor as thyself. The only commandment. I feel the conflict stretching out of comfort zone to see another's need. What if I were the person in the field, cold, wet, hungry, tired, fearful, pushing every day, running from war, seeking peace? What would I expect, hope for, accept? A kind look, an offer of food, a bed in a barn? What if every farm had refugees? What if my garage harbored refugees? What if the one toilet, shower, bath were in constant use until it broke down? Sewage erupting out of the forgiving earth, a tidal wave of bodies oozing forward like lava, inexorably flowing. Will the bodies harden on winter soil, frozen like the inhabitants of Pompeii, caught off guard? Will we, with frozen hearts, ever recover our former selves if we do not reach out to proffer what we would hope for if we were in need? How could we sleep knowing that the stream across the field and down the road continues, hearing strange tongues, looking into desperate faces? They are scared. I am scared. How can I not offer warm tea, a place to get warm if only for moments, a ride to the next town on the journey, help establish shelter, relieve guilt? Not in my own home, too close for comfort. Is it okay to take care of my own needs, to keep my own balance? What do I need? Warmth, quiet, peace. They need the same. How can I refuse them without refusing myself? Resentment, it's too hard, too much stress. For whom? Lying warmly in a soft bed, plagued by small worries by comparison. How can I live with myself doing nothing? The child stares. She could be my granddaughter. How can I refuse her? How can I say yes? Afraid of being overwhelmed more than I can handle. One person, one small family, maybe. Hordes need more than individual response. Town, city government, state, country. Slow to mobilize, shut them out. Then what to do? Across barbed wire fence, share bread, blankets, clothes, liquid. Still haunted by the eyes faced with bare human need. Have to act, give up comfort, find a way to help and keep my balance. Without balance, there's no way to be of any use. What if the traffic jam between New York and Boston were a jam of refugees like lava, halting everything in its path, honking horns, disbelief? How is this happening here? It's supposed to be there. The ball of the world is getting crushed by hands too huge to control. We're all being compressed, oppressed into one mass, bones cracking, giving way, filling the abyss with our screams, sighs, tears. What is beyond this journey? Where are we headed? Is there any hope? We're lucky if they don't want to stay. Gets us off the hook of guilt. A few kind acts, but no commitment. Like putting money in an envelope for charity, a way to give from a distance. It is still something, isn't it? Better than nothing, isn't it? Better also to acknowledge how I cling to comfort, a human need, just like theirs. Driving them from their homes across continents. What would I do? Maybe stay in a refugee camp, become part of the system there, make the best of it, if there is any best to be made. Order gives way to controlled chaos. Life as we know it, as they know it, is completely changed. Every empty building is prey. Can anything be defended? Their need is real. What can we do in the face of it? Sorry that it's a bit heavy, but considering everything that's happening in Rutland, which is like next door, and this was written actually at the height of the crisis of the European, and I have friends in Italy and in different places in Europe, and it's extremely complex. All these different questions come up, how to find a balance. There's no easy answer. Well, anyway, the next reader is Mike, and he didn't give me a last name, and I have a sense that he might come up with something a little different than what I have offered. So let's welcome Mike.
Well, yes, thank you, all of you. We came to Brandon for the Chinese food down the block, and we saw. Are you here for some reason, George? Just happened to know George. The drawback is he says he did tell us. We're in a writing group with George, and it's very competitive, extremely competitive. George comes in and says, "They're publishing my poem," and we're all supposed to be happy for him. And so anyway, I'm trying to prove that I'm above all that. I'm trying to be the better man. So we drove, didn't we, Dave? We drove. And then we had to make a right, and then we had to drive, and we make a left. And just about when we were sure we'd gone too far, we make another right. And we get to Brandon, and this is what we find. Um, but the drawback is that somehow escaped my mind that it was a open mic, or I would have brought my poetry and had something to talk about back at our highly competitive group. But now I'm being blocked by this thing. So when this comes up, I can't. I had my site all set up and everything. So anyway, if anybody knows how I can escape that, I did have a thing. No. No, I mean it won't. It just wants to go there. It doesn't want to just use the cell. Yes. But even in those situations, it has happened to me in the past. Well, first of all, I write into my little thing here, so I might find something. But even in those situations, I have certain things in memory, but they're probably not going to come up today. So I'm going to try to find something out of my little thing very quickly. I know I don't have much time. We want to get to George as quickly as possible. He always said, I published some books with poetry in them. I said, really? We didn't know. I mean, it's just George. He said, yeah, they have them on a shelf down in Brandon at this bookstore. And it wasn't until we drove, how many miles did we drive? I look, and there he is, right there. Our very own George. And who knew? Okay. Okay, here's one I wrote. This is a little story. The story will take longer than the poem, I promise. I was in Montpelier. It was a beautiful day, and I saw a sign. Yard sale. Cliff Street. And I thought, Cliff Street? Well, that's interesting. So I went up Hillside, and I had this, and up into Cliff Street. And I'm looking down over the city, and it's this beautiful place, this little enclave. And they live up there. Nobody even knows about it. And they said, this is just the way we want it. And I didn't have any money, so they kept giving me things. My Bluetooth headset, they gave that to me. So now I can stay connected. So while I was walking down, I thought of this poem. And this happened on September 3rd, by the way, in case anybody's keeping track. You say you live on the side of a cliff, but that seems highly improbable. Any neighborly tiff might send you into the crucible. So I wrote it about an argumentative person. And I don't want to read that because George and we have this thing about politics, and he doesn't believe anything I tell him, and so I don't want to. So he can tell his side of all these stories. Oh, I didn't think about that. Actually, I think my reservation for Chinese is in 5 minutes. This is a mess. Okay, this is a little bit political. It kind of reminds me of a discussion I've had with George at times. This was written on the 11th of September. Parasite or host, which one will it be? Which one gets the most for acting lazily? And of course, I picture in my mind those lamprey eels when they attach to very healthy fish. This is about Hardwick. Something about it's dingy, something about it's down, something about it's cringy in my hometown. I got that. It came to me as I was driving through there. I think it's a slightly dingy, this place. Anybody knows Hardwick? It's illustrious. And this one, I didn't put the whole thing in there. George knows it too. This one I fixed, and it's funny. I didn't really get any help from the group on this, but I went and did it on my own. I put them at my site, and then there's always a picture, and it's kind of like evokes sort of the sense of the poem, and I put it at my blog. This one, I started thinking about maybe going back through high school, because I had a major trauma in my senior year. This is the next day, the 12th. I could be the cool kid if I went back through again. All my high school fears to rid, my teenage soul to mend. Yeah, I write quatrains, so just about when you decide you don't like it, I'm moving on to the next one. All right, and speaking of which, That's about it. Anyway, it's all at my blog, and I'm really sorry. I had it all set aside. I set it all up into a little notebook so when I had these events, but I was so concerned with being supportive for George and being there for him that I set my career aside. So let's hope it's worth it. George. Thank you.
Actually, how about your last name, Mike?
Farron, F-A-R-R-A-N-D.
So that's where we would find you online?
You go to fewbetween.blogspot.com.
Okay.
That's my blog. It sounds like a
Anyway, I think you provided a really excellent intro to George, who is our featured reader. And I will read a much more mundane bio. I'd also like to remind you that we have books for sale with Miriam, who is one of the store managers, during our break and afterwards. And our illustrious authors are here to sign them tonight, which is a very special occasion. So I'm very, very pleased with this reading tonight because George and Yvonne are very good friends over a very long period of time. And I think Yvonne has even published some of George's work. And I always look in these readings to try to make pairings of interesting people, do you know what I mean, along themes. And I think both George and Yvonne write from deep sources within themselves in very different ways. And that's why I called it Why Writers Write tonight. So our first reader will be George Mathon. Born in Vermont, graduated from the University of Vermont, lives at Joe's Pond in Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, and is a frequent visitor to the Rutland area. Throughout all his years as engineer, economist, statistician, computer system administrator, Mathon has written poems. When he retired at the end of 2004, he began writing full-time.